I've said before, I want to have more conversations with different people in different industries and see what their take is on the whole Brexit stuff, or just what's going on in their, in their area of expertise and what they're sort of talking about. And farming in particular, I think, is going to become a very big issue again. Purely for the fact, I think you're going to see a lot of farmers really, really rebound against some of the trade deals that are being done. And that is the big thing that is going to drive those trade deals, or at least drive to maybe even getting rid or maybe attempting to renegotiate those trade deals. Of course, we've had the news very much recently that while Australia and New Zealand in those types of trade deals have exported over 1,000, like 1,500 tons of like beef and lamb to the UK, absolutely nothing of our beef and lamb and products have gone the other way. Yeah, because you because as we've said before, their industry in Australia in particular is just that big. You just cannot break into the market. They've got their own market on lockdown. So too does Canada, and we narrowly avoided that. Well, in fact, the entire trade deal, Canadian trade deal, fell apart because of that very thing. So it wouldn't surprise me to see more things like that in the future. However, I did come across someone, and I think this is very, very well worth repeating, from Liz Webster, and she's a farmer, I believe, or at least involved in the sort of restore, save British farming sort of campaign. So I'd love to speak to Liz. I'd love to have her on at some point, but I want to sort of respond to her video because she makes a lot of very, very, very good points that we've talked about in the past about sort of farmers, what they're doing, the importance of looking after farmers, how we can sort of help address their concerns, and of course also help improve our own sort of situation here as well, because we do, and I've said this before, we sort of ignore the rural economy when it comes to economics when it comes to on the left. So yeah, I think it's well worth just going over sort of a video and sort of doing a response to some of the stuff she said, because I agree with a lot of the stuff that she said here. So yeah, we'll dig into this then.
Farmers are not all one monolithic voting bloc. They didn't all vote for Brexit. What happened was the Leave campaign decided to use food, farming and fishing centre stage in their campaign, and the Remain campaign didn't go anywhere near food and farming.
Yep, I agree with that 100%. The Remain campaign just did not go anywhere near them. And it's not just during that campaign either. One of the reasons why I think farming was split and why it was almost very, very much sort of a 50-50 from what I've seen in the past, it tended to be that 50-50 split, was that the farmers always did have that sort of political support. Like they did have that political support. I mean, even during like National Farmers Week, you can see MPs with like their sheaves of wheat pinned to their jacket lapels. Meanwhile, you never saw anything like that for fishermen. You cannot almost name me any other politician like pre 2016 or even post 2016 who really sort of spoke for like these fishing communities, always like really into talking about fishing. They just weren't there, and that's why Nigel Farage capitalized so much on them. That's why they managed to do it. They capitalized on that, and he almost became the de facto spokesperson for fishermen in the UK. And as many people as myself warned those people time and time again, look, Farage isn't your friend in this area. He will throw you under the bus the first chance he's got, and he has done that. Farming, on the other hand, did have, obviously, its various numerous different advocates. Certainly the Conservative Party, that's where their traditional sort of base does come from. But yeah, it is that thing that we've talked about, that if you cede ground, if you don't talk about these issues, well, someone else will come along and fill that void. Farage is the perfect example of that happening.
And the truth of the matter is that the vote was split in farming because the vote in the country was split, because they're just people. And even if some farmers did vote for Brexit, I can tell you now that none of them, or hardly any of them, voted for what we've ended up with Brexit, which is an absolute mess, particularly bad for food and farming. But
yeah, I completely agree with that. No, none of these farmers will have voted for the outcome that they got. The whole ELM system that we know has gone down like an absolute lead balloon. The National Farmers Union big conference happened just recently, a couple of weeks ago, and that was the big topic of conversation. That your ELM system, your system to sort of replace the cap payments, the common agricultural payments that farmers used to get from that, nowhere near sufficient. And once again, favoring big landowners. Again, pre 2016, even Farage will go, "Oh, look, you're favoring all these, big landowners while you're ignoring the small farmers. This needs to be changed." And our government could have changed that if it wanted to, but of course, it didn't do that. So, time and time again, unfortunately, this is a recurring theme where if you let sort of the right into this realm and speak almost unchallenged, then it becomes a bit of a problem. Because there's no one to challenge them, there's no one to sort of speak back or push back against them, and you get the situation of what you had with fishing. Even now, many fishermen still blaming the EU for their poor treatment, their way they do it. When in reality, when you look at it, it's lack of sort of UK government support over a long period of time. But also the fact that they're dealing with sort of industrialization and they have not been able to adapt or compete in many cases with the changes to the industrialization of the fishing industry. More of the fishing industry has moved from actual, catching of the fish out at sea to more, more on stuff on land of like the processing of the fish. You've seen very much so farmers do try and diversify what they are doing. It's practically in the farmer's nature to sort of go and do that. I mean, we've seen that happen. But with fishermen, a bit more difficult when it comes down to that.
those of you, especially those of you who voted Remain, or perhaps those of you who live in the European Union and are angry about Brexit, being angry with people who voted Brexit is not helpful. It actually continues polarization. And it's also not correct, because the vote in 2016
Yeah. Again, something always worth echoing. I even see comments still to this day. Apparently, even though I say, yeah, the UK should eventually rejoin the EU, I still get very angry comments from people in Europe randomly, just like, okay. But again, there you go. Just something I suppose we're going to deal with, but there you go.
decided nothing. It was just a poll. And the Leave campaign, the Conservatives and Jeremy Corbyn were absolutely brilliant at validating it and making out that it was a democratic event when it wasn't. The vote which actually ensured Brexit was the 2019 general election, when 43% gave Boris Johnson a majority to get Brexit through Parliament, that's through the Commons and through the Lords, and ensure that we left the European Union.
And again, you saw that pre the 2019 general election, that the numerous skirmishes that took place, that the votes of, the series of indicative votes, where we almost ended up with the customs union winning, short by 3 votes. And a lot of people have said that if they had mainly just managed to convince some of those very recalcitrant people, there was a majority for staying in the sort of customs union and maybe even the single market. But again, who knows? Probably one of the many lost eras, of course. And of course, people talk about Starmer's excellent, remove the whip from people. Well, remember, Jeremy Corbyn removed the whip from 3 Labour MPs for voting for a amendment to stay in the customs union. So, hey, it's, yeah. It was a very weird poll. It was a simple, should we remain in the European Union? Yes or no, does not really get to how complex what that exactly means. And of course, what ended up happening was the extremists took over. They took over the poll. They started running the show and, of course, pushed for the hardest possible kind of Brexit, which, again, if that had been what had been put forward at the referendum or put forward in a second referendum, they wouldn't have won. No way. In no way in heck would they have won that referendum.
And that's exactly what happened. 43% gave Boris Johnson an 80-seat majority to deliver Brexit. And in 1983, Michael Foot did the same thing as Boris Johnson. He put in his manifesto that he wanted to leave the European Union.
Labour proposes massive public investment in industry, housing and social services, a more realistic exchange rate for the pound and a national agreement with the unions to cover pay, prices, profits and much else. On Europe, the document promises withdrawal in an amicable and orderly way. The law would be changed, there'd be negotiations with our partners, but after a period of transition, Britain would be out within the lifetime of a parliament. Labour would cancel Trident and Cruise, remove other US nuclear bases and include Britain's Polaris in the Geneva negotiations. But all this would have to be compatible with staying in NATO.
We cannot afford to continue with the present policies. We can't wasting it. We can't afford mass unemployment, and this our policy is the one that explains why and how we can travel in the opposite direction.
Yeah, that's another thing that probably we need to address at some point. The fact that there was obviously the original poll, and for some time afterwards, as you clearly saw there, it was Labour's sort of policy to sort of get out of the European Union, because part of the left saw sort of the European, well, at the time, or at least the beginnings of the European Union, even now, that's why the Legislative vote sort of still exists, to say that it was this big sort of capitalist trap, that we shouldn't be in this, that it will be sort of bad for sort of unions. But the reality is the EU is incredibly pro-union. Its largest voting bloc, its largest sort of political parties is from socialists. But there you go. Bizarre point, but yeah, it is something that we should probably address, I think, at some point. The fact that that was Labour policy, and what caused that to change. But yeah.
But he didn't win a majority. And most people that voted in 1983 remember that Michael Foot's manifesto was called the longest suicide note in history. But most people don't realise that Michael Foot wanted to do a Brexit, and he didn't need to have a referendum before he did that. Yes.
Yep. There again, so this is one of the arguments we hear a lot of, that you don't actually need a referendum to rejoin. You just need a parliamentary majority. Again, I could see that happening. I could see that happening if we got like say a future parliament saying, look, if we get a parliamentary majority, we will rejoin sort of the European Union, or start the process of rejoining. It's possible. Again, that's how sort of democracies work. But yeah, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. I think the EU would probably ask for a referendum just to make sure. But it's one of the many possibilities that has been floated around for since then.
We had a referendum in 1975. That was 3 years after we joined the European Union, and that was merely to see if people were happy with how being in the European Union had gone, or the EEC as it was called in those days. And that was because people in Labour were unhappy about being in the European Union. And it's that simple. So Don't blame people. People vote in elections, or they're persuaded to vote. The people that actually make things happen are the people that we vote for, MPs, and also those that,
Yeah, at this point, it's, let's bring up the words of course, James O'Brien. Blame the con men, not the conned. Something else I've advocated for. Look, the people who are responsible for Brexit are, of course, Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson, Michael Gove. It is those people who were the decision makers who sort of drove this. Again, Theresa May did not have to trigger Article 50. She was sort of forced into it by the soon to be of course Brexiteers who would eventually take over under Boris Johnson, and then of course dictate the hardest possible terms of course possible. Even now we've ended up sort of like the Windsor protocols. So it's one of those things of, what could these Brexit wars be reignited? I think that's why you've seen sort of Labour not want to sort of touch this at the moment, because they're worried about giving Rishi Sunak an opening. And I think certainly in the next Parliament, we will see proper conversations take place about this, which will be good. I think it will be very good, because there are not going to be a lot of Brexiteers potentially in the next Parliament. So with them out, with them unable to dictate the conversation, dictate the debate, so that do or do not happen, it will, I think, end up going sort of more back in that direction. And I've always said eventually we will just end up back on the path to rejoining sort of the European Union, whether it is sort of partially association agreement, whatever. We will end up sort of rejoining in some way, shape, or form.
basically oversee in the upper chambers the law that goes through. It is not the man on the street's fault. It is the Conservative Party who birthed Brexit. David Cameron actually birthed Brexit, but even before him, it was Nigel Farage. And before Nigel Farage, there were other people pushing for Brexit, from Zach and Ben Goldsmith's father, James Goldsmith, who actually founded the Referendum Party. For years, people have been working to try and do a Brexit. And now that we have a Brexit, what we need is to do the reverse to what they did. We need to make sure that we build a campaign which ensures we actually rejoin the European Union eventually.
Yep, exactly. This is it. And again, just keep on pushing sort of these parties, keep on pushing them on that. We know that there is a very, very big majority in Labour who would want to do that. So it's how can we sort of start to sort of mobilize, sort of rally them around that sort of plan and action. And I think as well as we sort of move on and we sort of see more damage, and then we sort of see again the plan of Starmer and Lammy that we've heard they want to sort of move forward and get that those like cooperation agreements and mutual things. I can't see the EU saying no to those, to be honest, because it's us basically saying, hey, look, we're going to sort of follow your rules and sort of regulations. Will this help remove some barriers, etc.? I can't see the EU saying no to that, because obviously we're following their rules at that point. Like I say, I think eventually you will reach a point where you'll just go, look, this is Brexit. This is as best as it is ever going to be. Are you sure you really want to continue on this? Because if we do, then you're talking about, again, continuous economic harm that we can't undo unless we rejoin. And we are starting to see that. We are starting to see that movement back. We're seeing the sort of the backlash against Brexit. We have seen continuously, time and time again, the polls very, very much now in favour of sort of rejoining, sort of moving towards that, rejoining the EU. There was a paper by I can't remember who it was now recently about looking at an association agreement like Ukraine's got, and doing sort of an association agreement by then, and sort of rejoining steadily just like that. It's all very possible and doable. It's just the work around it, and sort of the actual doing of it, and the political will to be able to do that.
eventually. We certainly need to get back in the single market and customs union very, very quickly, because things are going to continue to get worse, particularly for our food and farming. But ultimately, we really need to be united. And if you go around saying to people, nah, you voted Brexit, so I blame you, we are not going to be able to achieve the goals that we need to achieve. We have to be positive, and we have to unite.
Have to be positive. Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. I keep on saying this all the time. You get more done with positivity in politics than you do anywhere else. Constant message I sort of try and sort of put forward. I get called all kinds of stuff, but just for being, having such a positive attitude when it comes to sort of talking about politics and sort of potential, positivity and hope that you can have doing that. But no, I think you should, because it does, I think, put you in a far better mindset. I think, to sort of, have conversations and talk with people. So yeah.
Behind shared ambitions and not go around blaming people for what they may or may not have voted. I am one of the country's biggest and loudest Remainers, and yet I know what it's like to be someone who is blamed by Remainers for voting Brexit. And it's really not very nice. It makes you feel as if someone's prodding you and poking you and having a go at you. And really, what we need to say is, and what we need to agree on, is that Brexit is not working out. And that's already...
Yeah, and I agree with that. Although she's about to say it, that is the case. That is already the case. We can see all of the promises that were put forward. None of it is working. It has damaged our economy permanently. We need to undo that. And, sort of, again, rejoining, EU institutions, single market customs union, becoming a full member, etc. There are ways sort of we can do it and go back into sort of the EU. It's not impossible. It is very doable. But you just have to have certainly sort of the political will. And I think next Parliament, we are going to see those conversations start to take place, talking and looking at and assigning blame, I think, publicly in Parliament, blame for different industries. Well, this industry is having such a problem because of Brexit. And I think once we start to get numerous MPs start to saying that, as we are now getting businesses start to continually now say, look, we're having these massive problems. What's causing these massive problems? Brexit. And I think now you are going to get those businesses doing that. Because what caused us to join the ECC, the beginning of the European Union in the first place, it was businesses saying, we want to sort of be in the European Union. We are having, massive problems being on our own. Outside of this, we can see the advantages of being in it. That's where businesses are going to end up. And also, I think you'll also see a turn, maybe even in the Conservative Party, because if there's something that the Conservatives do pay attention to, it is, of course, and eventually businesses. And once they start really, I think, putting home the hammer on them, that's when we'll start to see, I think, some major moves.
Already happening. We're seeing that because poll after poll after poll is showing that really only about 9% of people are happy with Brexit. In truth, I think most people just don't want to admit that they were wrong. They kind of, some of them will say, oh, it's not the Brexit I voted for, all of this nonsense.
Yeah, not the Brexit I voted for. Yeah, because like I say, Brexit was during the referendum campaign, it was just this amorphous blob that could be anything to anyone at any time they wanted. So it could be about immigration, it could be about trade, it could be about something else, it could be about sovereignty. And that was it. It was just an amorphous blob that you can make about anything. But the problem always was, and always was going to be, then what? If you win, your amorphous blob then actually has to start to solidify. And the problem is, once you start solidifying it, problems with the sovereignty, trade, immigration, etc., aren't as flexible really as they, at least as they were sold as, really. So yeah, I completely agree with her on that.
But what we need to do as a campaign is actually sort of say, this is really going to make Britain good again and bring back our economy and make things better and give us less queues at the airport and at the port to France. All of these things. You're not going to have to worry about all of the red tape involved with trying to export and import.
Yeah, so many of these arguments now for sort of rejoining and again taking away all that stuff, and that's going to be a massive boon. Just the fact that you are going to see, or well, you already see the numerous stories of people during the summer complaining about once they get off the airport now they could have just walked straight out and started the holiday. They're now in queues, and it's not just you know a sort of a British queue that they're queuing in. It's everyone else queue, and in some airports where you have other big flights from again different countries, you can get stuck in those queues for sometimes quite a long time, depending on how busy the airport can be, and depending on what time you arrive. So that is being very, very noticed by a lot of people when they're going on holiday. Very, very much so. Since the end of the pandemic, that has been something that's been continually now sort of pressing forward. We're probably going to see it again during the summer. Also, we're going to see the environmental concerns about river pollution, just as we've seen last summer. Again, it's continuous rolling seasonal story. What's caused all those problems? Well, again, leaving the EU, leaving the sort of regulations, then you've got to point to people, well, actually, regulations are actually kind of important, even though they can be really boring to try and sort of explain to people and get people interested in regulations. It is very, very difficult. I know myself, like I say, I obviously I've started working marketing, and trust me, GDPR, doing I don't know how many meetings and talks that not only I went to, or at least I gave to people. I could see people like falling asleep, and I'm like, no, you have to stay awake. This is like really important. You have to know this. So yeah, it's difficult, but there are so many again good stuff that we can now sort of talk about, and being a really positive rejoin campaign.
Of the benefits of getting rid of Brexit are exciting, and the last thing we need to do or be talking about is blaming people for voting Brexit. So please, let's agree to stop blaming people for voting Brexit.
Yeah, I agree. The only people you need to blame, as I've said before, Nigel Farage. Yep. Oh, there we go. So Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson. Blame those people. They are the ones responsible. The Conservative Party that sort of put this through. Those pro-Brexiteers, the decision makers. Don't blame the ordinary people, on the street. They're not the ones responsible. They're the ones who were lied to. Ultimately, with the decision makers, and of course, these fanatics that we've seen push forward this incredibly hard Brexit, which, well, as you can see, has fallen to pieces. But there you go. So, as always, like I say, thank you very much for watching. Like I say, and of course to Liz again, if you do see this, like I say, please do reach out to me. I'd love to sort of have a conversation with you. Love to sort of do a live stream with you, talk about sort of British farming and sort of the challenges that are going on there. Would love to sort of hear what you've got to say on that. But yeah, as always, do go check out a channel as well. It is hold on a second. Liz Webster hashtag with the hashtag Say British Farming. I'll remember to leave a link to a channel down below. In fact, well, I'll actually tag her in the thing, so you can just click on that and it'll take you straight to a channel. But yes, as always, thank you very much for help for your watching. Like I say, please do click on the like and the share button, and of course, links down below to the Patreon page, the One Up Nation link where you can buy me coffee, etc. Patreon page, Pony Club is also down below as well, and of course the YouTube thank you button. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.